Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have me back. Let's start that over, Brad. Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me again today my good friend and guest host for this episode, Sarah Evans. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks, Angela. I'm glad you had me back. I guess I didn't do too bad the last time.
Oh, you've been a gem on every episode, and it's always fun to have you back because you and I like to just pick sometimes documentaries, sometimes just wacky, weird, random stuff. And this is definitely one of the random episodes. We just decided to do a bunch of new films, either out in theaters or on streaming. I think we got about half and half. I think two of these are in theaters, two are in streaming. So these are all new movies that are out right now, for better or worse. And so we'll get to that in a minute. So we each picked two, and I apologize in advance for some of my picks. And but that's the way it goes. We're here to educate and help the viewers, and maybe steer them away from some movies they maybe want to avoid. So. We'll start with my first pick, which was Jazzmans Blues by director Tyler Perry. And yes, it was a little surprising that I picked a Tyler Perry movie, but I was interested in this because he has done serious movies from time to time. And this one was a kind of a love project of his, one he'd been trying to get made for about 30 years. It follows the story of a young man who falls in love with a woman from his neighborhood, and it's a forbidden love story. His mother owns a juke joint blues club in their town, and he sings there on occasion. And we follow kind of his path as things start to unravel for him as he gets in deeper with this woman that he loves, and also starts to pursue a singing career in jazz clubs in Chicago. So here's the thing. I have to give a kind of a warning about to start with is I should have known, because this was Tyler Perry, that the music wouldn't necessarily be accurate to the era. But when I see here juke joint blues, what I have a very specific um, impression of what that music should be, because I am married to a jazz musician and also someone who is a collector of old 20s, 30s, and 40s blues music. And so, one of the things that was a little surprising to me when I was watching this movie is that the music does not sound like the music of that era, particularly the blues music. When he gets into Chicago and does some of the big band jazz, and particularly the young man who plays the lead character of Bayou, his singing style is actually a little bit more suited to jazz, but the movie is not really about music at all, which was a little
Mhm.
disappointing. It's really focused on this forbidden love story. And one of the things that was so disappointing about this is I know it's a melodrama and it's supposed to be very soap opera-y, and it really plays that to the hilt. Um, but what's so weirdly just weird about this movie is it's this kind of forbidden love story set in the Old South, but some of the most villainous characters in the movie are other Black characters. I mean, that really are the ones that turn their backs on the other characters. And it's like, okay, I get that if you do that once or twice, but his brother becomes a major villain in the movie. There's another man, Leanne's father, who's a huge villain in the movie. Leanne's mother is a huge villain in the movie. It almost kind of gives the racist white Southerners a pass because all of these other characters are doing so much evil that it was a little hard for me to overlook at some point. So I cannot recommend this movie, unfortunately. I'm curious to hear what you thought, though, Sarah.
That's really interesting. You said a few things I hadn't really thought about. I hadn't thought that deeply about the music part. I think that I don't know a lot about Tyler Perry's work, but the little bit I do know, I expected it to be more of a story about race and knowing that it was taking place in the South historically. I kind of expected that and didn't I didn't think about the Black people in the film being more villains. That's an interesting one I'll have to ponder. Um, I think that I think I liked the film. I didn't love it, but I found it enjoyable. I thought it was oddly billed as a unsolved murder from a long time ago, and that made me think it was gonna be more about solving this mystery or something, but it wasn't at
Right,
all. It was just
right.
telling a love story set in set in the Old South, and, I don't know how I feel about what you just said about the villains, because we all know that in that time period that the white people are villains. Um, and so,
Sure,
I
sure.
mean, sometimes that gets overplayed, maybe, but like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm saying they should get a pass because they shouldn't. But I don't know. You like kind of stunned me, Angela. I didn't expect.
Uh,
I was like, oh, I didn't think
Well,
about
it's,
that.
at the beginning
Um,
when she has so the character of Leanne, who is a light-skinned black woman, and I'm only bringing that up because it's actually pretty essential to the storyline and where it goes because her story evolves into something that's very much around the color of her skin. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
yeah.
Her father is just this horrendous person that we see is doing horrible things to her at the beginning. And so I thought, okay, God, that he's like this backwoods guy. He's taking advantage of but then as it went on, it was like, then her mother is this
Mhm.
horrible person. And then his Bayou's brother turns out to be, and his father. So it was a little bit over the
Yeah.
top. And they're the ones that actually end up sort of undoing everybody in a way. And I just, that part of the storyline really bothered me. And the thing is, we just had last year a film called Passing that Rebecca Hall did, which was one of the best movies of the year, in my opinion, that kind of took on some of these same issues in a way, but just day and night in terms of exploring the complexity
Yeah.
of that idea of passing because you are light skinned and all the nuances within that. And I just felt like this was kind of a missed opportunity. Again, knowing it was Tyler Perry and his style, I was expecting a little bit more of a soap opera melodrama. I haven't seen a ton of his films, but I've seen enough of his films to know that that's kind of what he does. One thing
Mhm.
that was interesting is I didn't recognize any of the actors in this, and that was kind of in a way refreshing because as people were coming out, it wasn't what like the one film he did a few years ago. What was it, The Butler or whatever, where it was just one celebrity after another that kept popping up in
Yeah.
these cameo roles. He in this one went for a lot of unknown actors, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice because I didn't know what to expect as people were coming on the screen.
I
So
thought it
I
was a
didn't know.
good choice too, because
Hmm.
I thought they all did a really good job. Especially, I was really impressed that I thought Bayou, the main character, not only acted the part well, but also was a good singer. And I didn't know who he was. And um, yeah, I agree. It's nice when you just kind of don't know the faces and you can just get into their character.
Right.
And you're right. I'm thinking more as you talk that you're right. There were a lot of villains among their own family, which is interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned Passing because I did think about that film while watching this. I saw that one and I also really liked that film. And I almost found myself sometimes comparing this to it because I'm like thinking about how that one Passing does a really good job of exploring how terrifying and difficult and dangerous it is to try to be a black person passing for white in that era. And
Yeah.
this film just kind of glossed over it, so it didn't feel authentic in that way. I mean, it was definitely an interesting story. Uh, but yeah, I like I said, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
main woman, the Leanne character, I thought was very unsympathetic. And so I actually
Mm,
got irritated through it because I kept thinking, "Bah, just move on." This woman, and it's not because of the situation she was in with the passing. She was extremely selfish. Like she knew that she was endangering this man that she supposedly loved, but she kept pulling him back in and being like, "Oh, please help me." And she really irritated me actually. And so I've never
yeah,
really loved the way Tyler Perry writes for women sometimes, and this one, it really irritated me. So anyway,
that's a
I
really
can't
good point.
recommend it. But yeah, I
Yeah,
thought Bayou was the strongest character, but I just thought after a while I was like, why is he so head over heels for her? Like she's not a very interesting character repeatedly throughout the movie, including at the very end when people warned her not to draw him in again. And she did it again knowing what was at stake. And then sat
yeah,
there and cried as she watched what happened to him. It just really bothered me. So
yeah. That's a good point. I kept wondering that too every time she showed up, like, "What are you doing? You know
Right.
this is dangerous."
Right.
Yeah, that was upsetting too. I agree Bayou was the strongest. I also really liked his mom.
Yeah, the show was a good character
I
as
thought
well.
she was awesome and an amazing singer.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think, I don't know, what's this do we give 5 or 4 for the total stars?
You do out of 4, yeah.
Out of 4, I'd probably give it 2.
Yeah, yeah. That's where I'm going
Yeah.
with too. Definitely wasn't the worst movie we saw, actually. We'll get to that in a minute, but in a few, well, in a little while, but it, I mean, I'm glad I saw it, but yeah. So,
Uh-huh.
okay, well, we should move on.
Yeah, okay. So the next film we're gonna talk about is Moonage Daydream. This is directed by Brett Morgen, and they bill themselves as a cinematic odyssey exploring David Bowie's creative and musical journey. Um, and I chose this one because I'm a huge fan of David Bowie. Um, I didn't know anything about the film going in. I didn't know anything about the director, or I think I saw it was a documentary. I'll talk more about that in a second. Um, and I was like, cool, I love David Bowie. I'm gonna go see this. Um, it was not a documentary, in my opinion. I described it more as like a psychedelic homage to David Bowie.
Hmm.
Um, there's no storyline really. Um, it's just kind of a mix of psychedelic imagery from other films and just artistic imagery mixed with Bowie images of Bowie and short clips of him at various points in his life, and including some live footage. And I think all the footage of him is awesome. I loved all the little interviews with him. I loved all the performances. But I need more of a story.
Oh,
I
really?
it This movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I think that it could have been done in about an hour. I got bored.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long movie for no real storyline or story arc and just
True,
like
true.
psychedelic homage, like that's a long time. Um I will say on the positive side, Bowie was such a beautiful person, both like the look of Bowie and just like in a lot of his interesting approach to life. And that all that really came through in this. Like that first hour, I think I was just like, oh my gosh, David Bowie. I was just like in awe of this man.
Hmm.
Then after the first hour, I was like, okay, like I'm kind of done now. It got kind of
Yeah,
boring
it
because
definitely
does
outstays
that.
its welcome. I did agree that
Yeah,
it's too long. I think I liked it more than you. I kind
yeah,
of appreciated that it wasn't a traditional biopic documentary in that I feel like David Bowie would have liked that because he admitted in a lot of ways that he was a collector, like he he collected from film and art and other people's music and kind of reassembled that into his own sound. He's not as much an originator in terms of creating an own sound as he is at taking other things and reassembling them and making it his own. And that's what the film, he was really influenced by film and visual art and poetry and other people's music. And I think that's what they were really going for, taking a lot of those clips from things. But I just think they didn't have enough for the amount of length that went. Like I remember they repeated some sequences from the film Metropolis, for instance. I think I saw the same sequence like 3 times from
yep,
that film. And just because I happened to recognize a lot of the film
yep.
clips they were using, they used some of his film clips from his own movies. And I thought that, like The Hunger and some other ones. But again, like I've seen I think for people that are big fans of David Bowie, they will probably like it from the experience of getting to see all this footage they've never seen before, because they
Yeah.
did have archival footage that they got from the family that had never been seen before, and that was very cool. If you're going in as a Bowie novice and you don't know anything about his life, this is not the movie to start. Luckily, I
No.
knew a lot of that. I even knew about a little bit about his relationship with his brother, although that was actually part of the more interesting part of the movie, is how much his relationship with his half brother impacted him at a young age. Not just that his older brother was the one that kind of turned him on to more kind of different types of music and books and art,
Mhm.
but also because he ended up in a mental hospital, and that kind of really terrified him at a young age that that was going to happen
Yeah.
to him. And so he thought, if I just keep myself as busy as and occupied as possible, I can keep going on that. and it really focuses mainly on his 70s, 80s period. Then as he gets older, not as much on that, which yeah, I guess makes sense because that's obviously
Mhm.
kind of his peak musical periods. But I do agree that I'm still giving it 3 stars. Like I recommend it, but I do think it ran long. I got a little impatient, probably like the last 20, 30 minutes. Like I kept thinking, okay, I think this could have been an hour and a half. Like they want to make it feature
Yes.
length. Like, they could have cut it down quite a bit because they did reuse some of the same footage again and
Yep.
again and again without like additional context. So,
I
yeah.
totally agree. Like, and I have to say I could not recommend this film to
Mm.
someone who's not already a Bowie fan because I
No, no,
just
if you're
think they
going
would
in
be
cold,
bored
you
with
wouldn't
it.
know.
Like,
Yeah, no, they wouldn't
okay.
know anything. There's probably some
And
good biographies they could read and some other
right.
documentaries out there about him if they wanted that. But I could see him liking it because I think he would like the fact that
Yes.
it doesn't try to explain him in a really obvious way. So,
I
or
agree
maybe
with
that's what they were going
that.
for.
I think that was what they were going for, and I totally agree with that. I think Bowie would have liked it. He wouldn't have wanted, I don't think, the very traditional approach.
Yeah.
Um, and
There's a
I
lot of
think,
kaleidoscopic images and stuff. It probably helps if you're
yeah.
on something, which I was not when I
Well, there's
watched it.
that too.
Yeah, so,
After like the first 20 minutes, I was like, oh, I guess I should have took something before I
yeah,
came
exactly.
here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm watching this totally straight. Okay, well, going in for that. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
Okay.
again, it really did. I think it did do a good job of capturing the uniqueness of Bowie. And as you said, he called himself a collector. He called himself a generalist too in the movie. Like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna try all kinds of different things rather than just trying to hone in on one thing. And I think it did a good job of capturing that. It was just
Yeah.
too long and repetitive at points, especially
Seems
with
to
no
be a
storyline.
theme with a lot of movies lately. Too long.
Yeah.
A lot of these I felt
Yeah.
like went
So
long in the tooth.
I think an hour to an hour and a half, I would have been like,
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
But after that, I was like, okay, I get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess
What are you giving it,
I
two
would
or two
say
and a
for
half?
Bowie fans, I might give it a 3. But if you're not a Bowie fan, I have to say I don't recommend it.
Right, right. Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about our next movie. So the next one is Do Revenge. This was written and directed by Jennifer Kaytin Robinson, and it stars Camila Mendes and Maya Hawke, and they play two teen girls, one who's at the peak of her high school powers, and another one who's an awkward new transfer student. But both of them are similar in that they've had their lives go up in flames because of bullies at their school. So they form an unlikely friendship as they form a secret pact to get revenge on each other's tormentors, which sounds awesome. I hated this movie.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you here.
So let me just
I'm
start.
glad we agree because I was like, if you really liked this, I'm going to be worried because some critics did. I don't
A
know. They
lot of
must have been
critics
on some.
do. It's
I don't
getting a lot
know.
of good reviews. Okay, so I was intrigued by this one. I by watching this one because I hoped it might be like Clueless. Clueless is one of my favorite films. I'm just gonna put that out there. And I thought, oh, this might be like an kind of like another Clueless or like
Yeah, we
another
wish.
that level of
Or
teen
Heathers, or
film.
even I would have taken a Mean Girls ripoff at that
Yes,
point.
yes.
Jeez, because that's because it was
But
also going in that direction. It's not
it
even as good as
was
Mean Girls.
no, it was not. It didn't hold a candle to those. So I had a lot of problems with this. One was that it was okay. It was trying to be an homage to all of those films, but all it did was just copy them for like no reason. Like there were
Hmm.
entire scenes throughout the films, like, oh, there's that scene from Clueless. Oh, there's that scene from Mean Girls. Oh, I recognize that scene. Like it like remade new scenes from that were a direct basically copy of those other films, but there
Yeah.
didn't even seem to be a reason for it. It was like, let's just see how many things we can pack in there for you to notice from other films. I was like, okay, that's dumb. Um, and that was one thing I didn't like. Another, I mean, one of the things I love about Clueless, I feel like all the characters are really fascinating in their own ways. And in this film, the two main characters were fascinating. The rest had like no depth at all. It was just like,
Right.
here's two interesting characters. Everyone else around them is just like totally shallow and like I don't even hardly know them. And so then I don't care about them. And then you feel like you don't even care what happens because of that.
Right.
So I didn't like that either. And then the film, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, but it does have a twist at one point. And basically from the twist to the end, I was like, this film is garbage. I was like, because the twist also felt forced. And then it tried to be make the film into something else. And I did not get there for me. And by
Yeah.
the end, I'm just like, this is the cheesiest written scene I have ever seen. Holy crap. And my husband walked in at that point and just saw that scene and was like, what is this crap you're watching?
You were like, I'm like reviewing this for real
I
film
was like,
snobs.
like I did not like it. Now, apparently, this film was loosely based on Alfred Hitchcock's film Strangers on a Train. I have not seen
Oh,
that film, so I
I
can't
have.
say,
It's a
but
great film.
maybe
I
you
would just
can
tell
fill
people
in
to
some
watch
more on that.
Strangers on a Train instead. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing really like that, but it's pretty. I mean, when you say loosely based, loosely, and it can be loosely based on something. I mean, Clueless is based on Jane Austen, right?
Right.
So it's fine. You can base something on something and still make it creative and wonderful. The problem here is, okay, you mentioned the two main characters are sort of interesting. Sort of is my thing. I didn't find, for one thing, all these people look like they're 30 years old almost. They look way too old to be in
Yes.
high school. And I know you shouldn't. And they live. It reminded me of like the high school in the movie Booksmart, although this is not as good as Booksmart, in that it's like some impossibly rich school where everyone is not just rich but incredibly woke, right? Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
talking to each other in their preferred pronouns, and everyone's
Mm-hmm.
got this thing. And this school, apparently, they never go to class. Everyone just sits in the courtyard, like drinking smoothies. And I was like, what is this? The main character, she's supposed to be the scholarship kid, right? Because it's a private school,
Oh yeah.
and she's supposed to be poor, and that's part of the reason she has her chip on her shoulder because her mom's a single mom and is a nurse. Well, she wears different outfits every single day that look like designer outfits, and she's dressed immaculately, and she drives a nice car. So I'm like, what is their version of poor exactly in
Yep.
this LA area? I mean, the whole thing was so ridiculous. I couldn't buy
Mm-hmm.
into the characters. I'm like, this is, with Clueless and some of these movies, it's like, yes, it's fantasy, Heather's the same thing, but there's a level where the characters are grounded in something, like you're like, oh, I recognize that girl. I went to school with someone like that. None of these
Yep.
people felt real to me in any way. As I'm watching, I'm like, I've never met any of these people. And I don't see, and I know lots of high schools, my friends have high school students, we're of that age around now, right? Nobody who dresses like that? These weird hats they were wearing, and like, what were these outfits? Like, I was just like,
Well,
what is
I feel like that was the homage to Clueless. I mean,
right with the pink
Clueless
and the, yeah.
Clueless was all about the ridiculous, over the top rich girl clothing, right? And it did a lot of that too, but I don't know if it did it better. Because you
Yeah.
still felt there was a depth to the characters, even though there was these obviously ridiculous parts about them. But you don't feel that depth here. And you're right, I forgot about, oh my God, it drove me crazy that that one character was supposed to be the poor scholarship kid, and she
I
was
know. I kept
not.
thinking, like, have they seen like Molly Ringwald, Pretty in Pink? Like, she lived on the other side of
Mm-mm.
the tracks. I actually showed her house in the movie, and it looked like a
It
working
was
class house. Like,
yes,
this gal
yes,
lived in like some, I mean, I was just like, you know what I mean? Like, give us, I
yes,
know it can be a fantasy, but give us some foundation in something that
yes.
resembles reality. And so, and you have
Yeah.
to, and the writing is just bad. I mean, that's what it
Oh,
comes down
so
to. And all the
bad.
movies we've compared it to, including Mean Girls, which isn't like my favorite teen movie of all time, but Tina Fey wrote it. And so it has that sharpness of dialogue. The writing here was not funny or interesting. There was no good
Mm-mm.
zingers. This is what you kind of expect in a teen comedy, some good
Yeah.
one-liners or something. So
Bad,
yeah,
bad.
definitely 1.5 stars for me on that
Oh
one.
man, I think I give it 1. I
One for
just
you.
did
Wow.
not like it. I wouldn't recommend it.
I'd still see it again over Blonde, which we're not reviewing, but that's when I was going to give it one till I saw Blonde, and I'm like, well, that's like a half a star to 1 star, and this one is, maybe one and a
Uh-huh.
half stars.
Yeah. Oh my
Okay.
goodness. All
Yeah. And of
right.
course, I didn't even get into the fact that at the end, everyone gets the exact person they wanted to end up with at the end. And anyway, I know we have to move on. So,
Don't even get
okay.
into that. Oh my
Okay.
God.
So our next
Hmm.
film, we only have a few minutes on this one, but I think it's fine to see how they run from director Tom George. I was really excited going into this one because even though it's a British murder mystery and it's kind of a wink wink British murder mystery in that it's kind of a spoof of the British murder mystery genre in a way. I love the cast of this, including to one of my favorite actors, period, Sam Rockwell, who stars as the world-weary detective who's taking on this case set in the Agatha Christie play The Mousetrap in the 1950s. And one of the people involved in the production ends up murdered, and then it's a whodunit, so they have to assemble everyone that's involved in the production together and try to figure it out. Saoirse Ronan, another actor I really like, who I actually think steals this movie, plays the up and coming constable who's kind of on the sidekick for Sam Rockwell's character. This is another one I was pretty disappointed in because with this cast, I just thought I was really excited, and Saoirse Ronan, I think, has great comedic timing and works really well. I'm not sure what Sam Rockwell's doing in this movie. He's usually such a scene stealer, but he doesn't have any, and I know that's part of the character, being that he's world weary, but he didn't have any, he wasn't that funny, and I was a little surprised. Um,
Yeah.
and oh, it also, I forgot it has Adrian Brody and pretty much every British actor you've seen in everything, also Shirley Henderson and a ton of other British actors. So it's kind of an enjoyable romp, but it's definitely like the film that as soon as I left the theater, I forgot about it. That kind of movie.
Yeah, actually, I agree 100%. It wasn't as good as I'd hoped. I like fun murder mysteries. And again, stellar cast. Always like Adrian Brody a lot. I did
Me too.
enjoy his character in this, but spoiler alert, I don't know. It happens pretty early. He doesn't get a lot of screen time, I'll just say.
You hear his
Mo-
voice throughout it though, which
yeah.
is also weird. He's the
Um,
narrator.
but I thought Saoirse Ronan was the definite runaway in this one. She did a really good job. I actually think most of the actors did a good job with what they had. I was also disappointed in Sam Rockwell, surprisingly, because I usually really like him, but I was kind of like meh. Um, but I think that the film was purposely trying to be really meta, like it's a a murder mystery within a murder mystery about murder mysteries,
Right.
which was the point. But I think it just did it too much and it made me
Hmm.
not interested. Like, because I knew all the meta layers to it, you knew exactly basically how the film was going to end pretty early.
Right. And then when you get
And
to
then
the end and it goes off of the screenplay, it's like,
yeah,
oh,
you're
come on.
like,
I was
huh.
rolling my eyes a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost kind of like, well, you weren't even going to change that. It kind of just felt like, okay, well, I know what's going to happen, so
Hmm.
it's not
Yeah.
that interesting anymore. So it was just did a little too much for me, I guess, because I just found I like in a murder mystery for things to be a little unexpected, and
Right.
that's not this film. And I kept thinking back to Knives Out, which I loved,
Yeah.
and
And I think they were going for that
I
type of
think they
thing, but it
were.
didn't
Did
work. Yeah.
No, it didn't work, and, I mean, I didn't hate it, it was fine, but I felt just like you, I walked out of the theater like, "Okay, I probably won't think about that one anymore."
You're right. That's out of my head. Yeah. So I'm giving it 2.5 stars. How about you?
Um, yeah, I'd probably about 2.5 also.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but meh,
Right.
nothing special.
Yeah. Well, we have to end now, Sarah. I'm sorry that next time let's try to review only great movies.
I
We'll
know,
aim for
right?
that next time. So, but thank you so much for joining me once again on Real Film Snobs. You can
Yeah.
go to our website, Facebook. We're on CC Media in Salem, Scan TV, Silverton, Corvallis Access Media, KMUZ Radio, KMWV Radio. Thank you to Brad Wortman for all your work on the show and to our amazing sponsors. Sponsors, thank you. Have a great day and great movies.